Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. Muslim leaders in Canada and around the world have been denouncing terrorism for years. But with news of dozens of young Canadians going abroad to join groups like ISIS, some Muslim leaders in Canada are trying to do more to prevent the spread of violent extremism. To that end, the Winnipeg-based Islamic Social Services Association and the National Council of Canadian Muslims have teamed up to produce a handbook called United Against Terrorism. The handbook explains that terrorist ideology is not in line with Islamic teachings and discusses what parents and community leaders can do to protect young people from extremism. Joining me to discuss the United Against Terrorism handbook is Dr. Shabir Ally. Dr. Shabir Ally, what are your thoughts on this latest effort by Canadian Muslim leaders at denouncing terrorism?
It's an interesting effort. They may just step forward. I have here a copy printed off the internet, although the leaders offered to send me a free copy, which I'm expecting to receive soon, of the colorful booklet. United Against Terrorism, it's a very interesting title to start with because it reflects the fact that Muslim leaders across Canada are united in denouncing terrorism and in making efforts at preventing our youth from going abroad to join in fights that could actually cause them to become more radicalized and cause them in the future to be problems if they return to Canada.
How can Muslim leaders and parents benefit from this document in helping to stop people from being radicalized?
There are several guidelines that are given here. One is that when you observe your child suddenly becoming isolated, no longer associating with the usual circle of friends, spending a lot of time on the internet, they might start espousing political ideologies. They may start having very negative attitudes towards women. All of these, according to this booklet, are signs that your child may be becoming radicalized, and you need to be aware of what they're up to.
How can we teach young people that these radical ideologies are not actually part of Islam? Does the handbook address that?
Yeah, the handbook talks about the meaning of jihad as a struggle, and struggle against one's baser desires, for example, and allows for the fact that defensive warfare is permissible in general in Islam, but at the same time warns against those who may use that idea to justify any kind of violence against others. The handbook also deals with the fact that many wars which are going on in other parts of the world are very complex in their nature. It is not as simple like Muslims versus others. There are many complex entities involved, and a young Muslim Canadian will not have the capacity to weigh all of the factors that are involved and would easily be drawn into something in which he or she does not really belong.
The handbook includes a section by the RCMP talking about their role in combating terrorism. How should Muslim communities cooperate with law enforcement in dealing with this problem?
There are two sections that are related to that in the book. One is from the RCMP, showing the RCMP's role and responsibility in curbing terrorism and crime more generally, and the methods that they use in combating crime and terrorism in particular. That section points to a number of articles on the RCMP website that could be very helpful to parents and also to youth, which I find to be very interesting because it shows the openness of the RCMP in reaching out to people to build understanding and trust, not simply to impose themselves as authority, but to help people to understand what the issues are and how they themselves can cooperate in preventing crime. The other issue is a chapter in the booklet that deals with civil liberties and how these relate to Muslim cooperation with law enforcement agencies.
Mm. Now, there seems to be throughout the booklet some grievances that young people might have, about discrimination, a feeling of alienation maybe from society. maybe not fitting into Canadian culture. How do you think those things contribute to extremism and to radicalism?
It is interesting that some independent studies have been cited here, not done by Muslims, done by, let's say, NYPD, to think about what causes radicalization. And this is one of the factors that is cited in those studies, the factor that Muslim youth can feel alienated, discriminated against in their societies. So if you think, for example, of a typical Muslim, could be Pakistani or from some other part, whose parents are from some other part of the world, but the child is Canadian, born here, and this is everything they know. But if people keep referring to them as foreigners and tell them, for example, go back home or something like this, then the child starts to feel really out of place and is struggling to find his or her own identity. And that could lead the child down a path of trying to reclaim a kind of glorious identity for himself or herself. And one may find attractive then the appeal of some internet site promise that kind of glory and vindication in martyrdom, for example. So we need to be aware as a society that by painting Muslims in a particular light, or by discriminating, especially with racial profiling or something like this, we could be further radicalizing some of the youth, even though our intention really is to curb radicalization.
How do we convince youth to remain connected with society, to continue to come to the mosque? Because it mentions that part of a sign of radicalization is actually withdrawing from the mosque.
Yes, what is recommended here is that parents should work together with their kids, try to spend more quality time with them so that they do things together. Be aware of who the teachers are in your local mosque. Go attend the lectures together so that later on you can deconstruct the lecture. Be willing to do some homework so that you can question the scholars who are presenting ideas to you and to your children, so that through this overall process you will get to know who are the moderate preachers, what they preach, and who to avoid. And especially so you will be able to instruct your children and guide them in selecting which scholars to listen to when they do go on their internet searches.
Do you feel that this handbook will be successful in curbing extremism amongst Muslim youth in Canada?
The handbook is already extremely popular among Muslims, and I expect it will be used more and more. And because the guidelines are so comprehensive and simple at the same time, I believe that many of these guidelines will be effective. Of course, this happens to be the first printing. I'm sure that in the future it will go through revisions, especially from the point of view of editing, but also perhaps from the point of view of restructuring.
And what do you think needs to be added to or changed to make it more effective document?
I think it's very effective as it is, but it seems to me that if it's restructured, it may be more effective, because we have, for example, the one chapter from the RCMP telling us about the role of the RCMP and how good it is for us to cooperate with the RCMP, and even the chapter before that stressing many such features of cooperation between Muslims and the law enforcement officials. But then comes a chapter that talks about civil liberties, and that seems to be in contrast to what has gone before. So if these chapters can be integrated such that while we're being told about the benefits of cooperating with the law enforcement officials, at the same time something is added to clarify that there are civil liberties involved, and that our law enforcement authorities do not expect us to do anything that will contravene our civil rights. So if the two ideas can be blended together into a continuous narrative, that may come across better than to have them, the two ideas as disjointed ideas in separate chapters.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your insights on that.
You're welcome.